Good morning. My name is Julie Fritsch. I am the director of the Office of Pro-Life Activities with the Archdiocese. I want to thank Matthew Cruz for inviting me to be here with you today. When he asked me to speak about pro-life and the dignity of human life and said, you have about 15 minutes to do it, I kind of laughed because really the topics that we're going to be touching on today, we could spend a semester talking about all of the things that go into pro-life, all of the things that go into human dignity, all of the church teaching behind all of that. So what I want to do today is just give you a bit of a flavor of what does the office do, what are some things that I think you as parents might want to consider that are relevant to pro-life issues. And then hopefully this will be a starting point either for you and your group to go deeper into some of these discussions, or I'm happy to come back and talk in more detail as you have questions. Of course, you're always free to reach out to me via the office website, via our Facebook page. You can find us at archgh.org. So if you have any personal questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. So the first thing that I want to say, I think when we hear the term pro-life, it is so connected to politics and unfortunately a lot of the division that we see in our country. You know, we'll see, well, you can't be a good Catholic or a true pro-life person and vote this way, or, you know, you're not really Catholic if X, Y, and Z. And certainly we know that there are a lot of secular pro-life groups who do focus, usually the Republican Party is their party. And so I think it's important to say that we as the church, certainly we do some advocacy work. So we'll look at particular bills that are coming up. For example, Texas legislature started last month and will be going through May and June of this year. And there's some really important pro-life bills that we want to be aware of and let people know about. At the same time, we tend to focus much less on politics as the church. We're really about the principles of life and dignity. And so I just want to assure anybody, if you're a Republican and intend to vote that way, you're very welcome here. If you're a Democrat and intend to vote that way, you're very welcome here. These are principles that should be universally applicable to us as Catholics. But we know that there's some controversy. So I just want to let everybody know, first and foremost, you're welcome here at the table. And I'm glad you're able to be watching this video. As I mentioned, our principle, what are we starting with? You know, is this idea of the inherent dignity of every person. And this comes directly from some of our most famous scriptures. So when we're looking at what is the human person, when we look at the creation accounts of Genesis, we see that the human person is created in the image and likeness of God. So every person that's sitting next to you, or that you're watching on a Zoom meeting, or that you see at Mass, or that you see on the street, every person is created in God's image and likeness. So we have that divine spark, if you will, about us. And not only is that how we're created, but we are created for eternal life, and we are created to spend eternity with God. So that is our goal, and that is constantly what each and every person is looking towards. And so how we treat each other, whether we give particular rights, give particular deference to any given person, it becomes very important because of that shared eternal destiny that we all have. And sometimes I've heard it described this way. We know that God is infinite and omnipotent. And if you think of a gemstone that is faceted, God has infinite facets. But each of us in our uniqueness is called in a way to reflect one of those facets. We are called to reflect something about God. to the world, to those around us. And if any of us are missing, so if any of us are lost to abortion, if any of us are lost to euthanasia, in some way that reflection of God is forever taken from the world. It can't be, that reflection is not made manifest, which is a deep tragedy for all of us. That's something that we all miss out when any one of us is gone. So that's my brief explanation on that. Obviously, as I said, we could spend days on the topic of human dignity, but I like that analogy. So maybe sit with that for a few minutes. So what do we do in the office when people hear the term pro-life, that, oh, you're the anti-abortion people? And certainly working against abortion in a variety of ways is a lot of what we do, but it's not all that we do by a long shot, because what we are primarily concerned about, yes, is human dignity through all of the life issues that we deal with. So abortion, euthanasia, capital punishment, but also the things that lead people to feel like that is their only option. So one of the most famous programs that we have, of course, is Gabriel Project. And you may or may not be familiar with that, but that is a parish-based ministry that's run through the Archdiocese that attempts to help women in difficult pregnancies to get items for their children, but also to have someone to accompany them. So a lot of the women that we work with, they may be immigrants, they may not have stable family situations. And so whoever is working with that mom, it's not only about getting her a car seat or a crib or diapers or things like that, even though those things are very important, but it's also about being a friend, helping to model some good parenting behaviors, helping to, what are your life goals? How can we help you to reach that? So not only so that you can be a great mom and a good parent, but let's use this opportunity of this new life to help you on your life journey, help you to find a community. So that is the Gabriel Project. There's also a new national program that we're going to be restarting this year. It's called Walking with Moms in Need. And that is really a recognition that Gabriel Project is wonderful. We help people during pregnancy and maybe a year after pregnancy. But as any of you who are single parents know, or just parents in general, your problems don't stop. Your difficulties don't stop in raising your kids once they're a year old. So there are a lot of gaps that we want to try to fill. And so our first step is, where are the gaps, maybe in our parish community or within our parish boundaries? What are the needs that are not being met? And let's see how we as a parish, or maybe with a few sister parishes, can really work and try to address some of these gaps that we have. So that's the idea of Walking with Moms. We'll be hearing a lot more about that in the months to come as we kind of relaunch this program in the midst of the pandemic. We also have a ministry, Jerome's Hope, which reaches out to families who have suffered either miscarriage or stillbirth, or who have received some type of prenatal diagnosis. We know that oftentimes the medical community is not as caring and as supportive as they could be for parents who are wanting to carry that child to term. So we have a variety of support, both from other parents. We have retreats, and really this is an accompaniment ministry too. So if you or your family has fallen into that situation, or you know somebody that's in that situation, please do reach out. We will be having a retreat for parents coming up this spring. That may be something you're interested in. Of course, we have our Project Rachel ministry, and this is the ministry for families, women, men, sometimes couples who have undergone an abortion experience. When I start talking about abortion, I always want to preface it by saying this. If that is your personal situation, if you are someone who is post-abortive, first of all, I'm really sorry that happened to you. But I do want to assure you, there is a place for you in the church. There is healing and forgiveness possible. We don't talk a lot about the healing and forgiveness. We tend to talk about abortion is a bad thing, abortion is a bad thing. Yes, absolutely, it is. But we also know that so many of the people who made a decision for abortion did so because they really didn't feel like they had any other choice, and oftentimes would have rather done almost anything else. So we do recognize the difficulties that this decision has caused, and we do want to help. So again, we have English and Spanish retreats coming up this spring. And lots of other things that we can offer. So if that is your situation, definitely do reach out. We would love to speak with you about that. Through my office, we do a lot of the bioethics education, a lot of the technologies, what would you call it? Just social things, for lack of a better term, that happened at the end of life. So we're talking about care of people at the end of life. We're talking about certain reproductive technologies that a couple may be offered in a time of infertility. And then kind of everything in between. We talk about what's going on with the vaccines. I hear they used fetal cell lines. Is it okay for me to take that vaccine? Okay, the church says it's okay. Why does the church say that it's okay to do that? So in our bioethics curriculum, we get into all of those kinds of questions that most of us in our families are going to run into these questions at some point, and it can be very difficult for a Catholic to know what to do, especially because a lot of these technologies are very new, and sometimes the church has not come out and definitively said what a Catholic is supposed to do, or well, certain reproductive technologies are okay and some of them are not, and how do I know which one is okay? We go into all of that, but that can be very difficult for families. We also do ethics consults through the office. So during the height of the COVID pandemic, we were getting a number of calls. My family members in the hospital, doctor is telling us to sign a DNR, a do not resuscitate order, and I don't know what I should do. Can you help me? And so yes, we will try to walk through those issues with families. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, yes, we do some advocacy, and what our advocacy usually looks like is not advocacy for or against a particular political party. It's really about, is X policy a good policy? Does X policy support the dignity of life, or does it take away from it in some sense? So as I mentioned, the Texas legislature is in session right now and will be through, I believe, the end of June of this year. So we will be looking at a lot of the bills that have been filed. Do they or do they not comport with our Catholic idea of human dignity, and do they uphold human dignity? So the final thing that I would like to talk to you about, because I know I'm talking to a lot of parents, is really this idea of how do we focus on the family? Because a lot of the pro-life issues that we see, so abortion, euthanasia, etc., these are really, as I like to describe them, these are the symptoms of problems. They're not the root problem itself. And one of the root problems that we have in our society that leads to things like abortion and euthanasia really is this lack of understanding of A, what is the human person for, and B, what is the family for? And we're a very individualistic culture. So we tend to look at, as we're raising our kids, even, we tend to look at, what am I doing? Am I meeting my goals? Am I being a personal success? And we tend to not look as much at our community. Am I contributing to my community? Am I being a good member of my community? And really, a family, when we look at that from a Catholic perspective, the Catholic Church does not think of the individual unit of humanity is not the individual person it's really the family. A lot of us don't have great, very healthy families, but that is the ideal, is that the family is the basic unit of society. It's not the individual. And so as we are raising our kids, it's really important for us to think about not only, what are our goals for our kids educationally, socially, in terms of extracurricular activities, but it's equally important to talk to our kids and to help them plan, what is your future family going to look like? I know for myself, I was raised in a Catholic family. My parents were wonderful people, but in this particular case, I think they could have done better in what I'm about to talk about, which is I was very much raised that you get a good education, you be as good a student as you can, you go to the best college you can, you be the best in extracurriculars that you can, you have the best career you can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was raised went to high school and college in the 1990s, so not too long ago. So some of you may be experiencing, some of you may be my contemporaries and kind of raising your kids from that mindset. But what I never talked about with my parents was, okay, well, what is your future family going to look like? And how are you going to plan for your goals with your family in as much as you're planning for your educational goals or your career goals? And I think that's really important because that was sort of, I knew what I was supposed to do in terms of these other things, but I really didn't think it's like, well, family is just something that's going to happen. And there's this great story from a University of Chicago professor that I like to share. So probably 15 years ago, she was meeting with her undergraduate class. And one of the questions that she asked them was, what is the decision that you're going to make in the next 5 to 10 years that is going to have the greatest impact on your future happiness and fulfillment? And so most of the class was saying things like, well, it's going to be what job I get after graduation, or it's going to be what graduate school I get into, or things of that nature. And so one young man kind of raised his hand and he said, well, it's going to be who I decide to marry and start a family with. That's going to be the decision that is going to have the most impact on my future happiness and fulfillment. And this professor talked about how the students around him very much looked at him like, well, that's crazy. The men in the class tended to kind of disparage his comments as saying, why would you be concerned with something so relatively insignificant as who you're going to marry? And the women in the class kind of got upset and, well, why are you looking at a woman essentially as just a uterus? Why? Which of course was not what this young man was saying at all. But the teacher, the professor, kind of looked at this and she said, there's real wisdom in that response, because jobs come and go, careers come and go, all of these things come and go. Really our community, our family, what we build there is what is lasting and ultimately the most meaningful. And so as we look at how are we raising our kids, are we giving them that message? Or are we telling them that something else really is much more important? Not that we want our kids to not get a great education, not that we want them to not be successful in life, but are we putting as much emphasis on that very important aspect? Because when we don't, what we see is that our kids become very individualistic and they buy into that piece of the culture. And, things like abortion and euthanasia can become much more acceptable to them. And we know that, unfortunately, a lot of the women and men that wind up at our post-abortion healing retreats had their abortions as teenagers. That was something that their Catholic parents insisted upon, because this is going to mess up your career. This is going to mess up your life. And so they had made some of their decisions about their sexual activity based not on what their family was going to look like, but based on really, other things. Those were not considerations. So I encourage you to kind of think about that as parents. And all of these things are discussions that we can have in more depth. Everything that I've said today deserves to be dealt with in more depth. So I'm always willing to have that conversation. I hope this has given you a few things to think about. And certainly if you have any more questions, please reach out to me. You can find my email on the Archdiocesan website. That is probably the best way to get in touch with me. But I hope I've given you some things to think about. And thank you again for Matthew and the staff at St. Bernadette for inviting me. And I hope to continue our conversation at a future time. So have a wonderful day. Thank you all. Bye-bye.